Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, and thank you for joining me here on Transcending Sport. I'm Chris Stafford, and this is the show where we tell stories of organizations, charities, media initiatives, and campaigns that support women in sport around the world. This is Season 2, Episode 6, and you can join in the conversation at any time by following us on social media and posting your comments. That's at Wisp Sports, and you can reach us by email. If you care to drop us a line, that's info@wispsports.com. We'd love to hear from you. And our website is wispsports.com. My guest this week is the Managing Director of Beyond Sport, Alexandra Chalat. Beyond Sport convenes, funds and supports organisations using sport as a tool for social change. And after joining the organisation in 2008, Lex helped the organisation grow from the ground up, whilst also co-founding thinkBeyond, a sister advisory firm that provides ways for governments, companies and charities across the world to create positive social change using sport. Lex has curated gatherings in cities around the world for thousands of people, where hundreds of high-level experts in politics, tech, innovation, shared value and ethics discuss sport's role in hard-hitting issues like the refugee crisis, youth gun crime, and religious and ethnic divides. Lex, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this is a rather challenging time for us to be talking for your organization. A lot of people are working from home now, but you have such a large organization that it must be impacting you quite hard.
Yeah, the reach of our organization, obviously we reach out to 3,000 organizations worldwide, all using sport to address issues in their community. And they really are taking a hit in these times. It's really a shame. A lot of organizations are having to cease programming and sort of take all of that off the table. And as a result, a lot of young people are not receiving the services and the support and the aid that they have come to expect and need from these organizations. So yeah, it's a really tough time. And I think the uncertainty is also the hardest as well. But, through times like this, innovation and creativity and those types of things always come to the fore, don't it? And I think in our sector, we're used to that. We're used to dealing with adversity, and we're used to looking at an issue and seeing how can we solve it? How can we play a role in society? And how can we address this? And so I'm sure that out of, the ashes will rise again. I've already had some interesting conversations with some great organizations around how they can use sports and use their knowledge and what they do to address this issue that will be, having long-term effects on young people and communities. So yeah, it's a tough time. It really is, but hopefully our sector will be able to sort of band together and look at this and address it.
As I said, your organization is far-reaching. I believe you're in 135 countries. Is that correct now?
Yes, we reach 135 countries, either through funding organizations, providing them with support, advising them, and convening around different issues. And it's every single type of organization you can think of, large teams, leagues, rights holders, brands, through to tiny organizations in small villages and rural areas that are just using sports to address their local issues.
Now, you've been with the organization, 12 years now, so you've really been driving this and driving the growth of the organization too, Lex. Give us a sense of where it was when you got on board and where you are now in terms of achieving the goals that you set out for.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about. I mean, Beyond Sport had just gotten started. I was its first official employee, and it had really been founded by our CEO and founder, Nick Keller, who had been working in the sport industry for many years, and entertainment and hospitality and sports agency sector. And right during the recession, 2007, 2008, he really saw that the sector of sport was really going to be held more accountable to shareholders, to society. And that really led to him thinking, okay, how can sport really make a difference, and how can we look at this in a different way? And that led to Beyond Sport being founded in 2008. And I had just been finishing my dissertation at London School of Economics, specifically on this issue, unique catalysts for change, and what sports and arts and sort of non-traditional approaches to aid and support, the effect that can have on communities and the socioeconomy of a community. And so this was just perfect for me. And I joined, and it really just exploded right off the bat. It was the right moment, the right time for an organization like Beyond Sport to come along. There were, of course, many, many organizations already using sports as a tool to address issues around the world. And we sort of joined that in a unique way, where we kind of bridged the gap between the corporate sports world and sports industry and the NGO charity side of the sport and social change, and sort of facilitated that connection and that cross-sector opportunity. And now we, as you already mentioned, we reach 3,000 organizations, and we really do a lot of different things. We convene and hold events, now digitally, of course, around key social issues like the STEM education crisis, the refugee crisis, the employability crisis, and look at how the sport community can really address that in many different ways. We fund projects, of course, through our foundation, and that can be anything from a rugby project addressing gang violence in Venezuela through to a soccer program addressing the challenges and the issues around FGM in a small community in Kenya. And then we also advise organizations through our consultancy, thinkBeyond, which I helped start in 2014, again, seeing a sort of gap in the market. And through that, we really support brands, governing bodies, NGOs, and talent, really athletes as well, around their social responsibility strategies and how sport can play a role. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it doesn't come as a surprise to anyone listening to this, the impact that sport has, the power of sport. So you're looking at it from a very much bigger picture than what's happening on the field of play. This has far-reaching implications, and it is, as I said, very, very powerful. And when you think of some of the issues that you're addressing, that I read was refugee crisis and ethnic and religious divides, and the youth gun crime situation. I mean, this is a tremendous impact socially. So it must be enormously gratifying for you, Lex, to have this kind of impact that the organization has.
Yeah, it is gratifying. I wake up every day excited to go to work, and also just grateful to be able to work with amazing organizations that are actually doing that on the ground and in the trenches every day. I think the point that you made is really, really important. A lot of people, especially in the development world, they hear sport and their eyes kind of glaze over, or they think, oh yeah, you do sport and social change. Yeah, it's really great to get a bunch of kids moving, or a bunch of kids from, two different ethnicities or races playing a sport together, because that really helps. And for me, it's just incredibly important to ensure that people understand that sport can really play a very, very powerful and purposeful role in addressing social issues. And it's really not about just throwing a ball in the middle of a group of kids. It's about really sophisticated methodology, curriculum, really trained and talented leaders, coaches, educators, and of course, a wider sort of understanding of the community landscape and what that looks like. And that to me is really what makes sports' role in addressing social issues actually have that impact that you just talked about, beyond, physical activity and participation and the peripheral impacts that come off of that, which are important. But at Beyond Sport, we really do believe in a sort of more purposeful approach to using sport, and how sport needs to be part of a wider and holistic methodology and understanding of a community or an economy, in order to have that impact. And that's really what we're always working on.
And obviously, you're honing in on a lot of disadvantaged groups and sectors of the community too, aren't you, when you go around the world?
Absolutely. I mean, we're very specific about the organizations that we support and convene, and who they're trying to approach, and trying to engage and have an impact on, whether that be a certain demographic, a certain age, a certain socioeconomic background, of course. So it's absolutely crucial that we're reaching those that, I don't like the term hard to reach, but we're using everything we can to reach those that need support the most. But the sort of new kind of approach, or I guess it's not that new, but over the last 5 years, a key thing around this is really shifting the mindset around that and empowering communities and young people and whoever your program is set up to engage in an impact, empowering them and giving them a voice, whether that be in the design or whether that be in the actual delivery of the program, making sure that they're not, quote unquote, the beneficiary, but they're the kind of co-designer of their own fate. And so those are really the programs that we really are looking at right now in terms of supporting. The Sports Creative, which is a really interesting program that only got started a couple years ago, designs and co-creates their entire program with the community that it's supporting, and with the young people that they're supporting. Love Football, another really interesting program that builds sports spaces, but they do it through a community engagement model, and they do it through a community ownership model. And so they're really like partnering with the community in order to build a sports space, and that then becomes part of that community's landscape and helps it in a social and an economic way. So those are really the sort of trends that we're seeing in terms of who is important to engage with is important, but it's really how are you engaging with them? That's key, and that's what we're seeing across the board.
You really are empowering them, aren't you, in so many different ways. I wonder how you measure the success, though, because each country is different. Give us a sense of the impact, and the footprint that you're having, and the takeaways, the results that you're measuring from these activities.
Well, that's the question of sport and social change across the board, is the impact and the specific sports piece to that impact. And essentially what we look at is the different measurement tools that organizations are using, and support them in how they themselves are really approaching this. So there's a lot of different software, a lot of tools that are being developed right now that we partner with and work with, like Upshot, where there are intuitive ways to measure the impact of the program and what that looks like. From our perspective, obviously, we have to measure the impact of our convenings. Again, as I said, in person, but also digitally. And the impact that we measure there is how the group is really working together to achieve an issue and address an issue. So for instance, our Sport and STEM Alliance, which looks at sports' role in addressing the STEM education crisis here in the US, we have developed a way for those members which come across sports teams, leagues, NGOs, individuals who have all sort of signed up to be part of this alliance. We work with them on identifying what they wanted to address and how, and then facilitated resources and funding in order to achieve that. They, through a process of design thinking and working together, decided that the most effective way they could make an impact was educating the educators around how sports could be used to better engage their students in STEM. And so we're working with them now on developing those standards and then disseminating it to educators, the impact of which will be hopefully hundreds of educators across the country using these tools to engage students, and thereby, of course, more young people staying in the STEM subjects, specifically young people that are minorities and that are girls, because that's really where we're seeing the most drop off. So it really depends on which initiative we're working on in terms of impact and how we measure it, but that's just one example.
How is Beyond Sport funded next?
So we have a few various structures for each of our pillars. So as I explained before, we convene, of course, we support projects, and then we advise. And so through the convening, we work on really a partnership and sponsorship model. Organizations that are interested in a specific issue and want to work with us and support us in that initiative, we work with them in that way. We have a 501c3 that is ring-fenced so that we can support projects and provide grants. And then our consultancy, thinkBeyond, works just on a client basis. So we charge a fee for our services.
And in terms of the campaigns that you have then for this year alone, give us a sense of what they are, what your focus is going to be in 2020.
Well, if you had asked me that a couple weeks ago, it might be a little different.
Right.
But I think we're staying the track. Because we're so global, we have many digital and sort of virtual initiatives taking place. And of course, we don't fly to every one of those countries at all. We support them remotely. So hopefully our objectives will maintain the same, just probably with a few less in-person events. But this year we really are focusing on a few things. I already mentioned Sport and STEM Alliance and the STEM education issue, but that's a big focus for us. We've seen how the tech world has both benefited but also detracted from opportunities that young people have, and we really feel like sport can play a role in addressing that STEM education dichotomy, whether that be the brain drain from the global south or the lack of engagement in STEM skills and STEM education in the global north, and really looking at that issue and how sport can play a role. We'll do that through multiple best practice shares, webinars, as well as I already mentioned that initiative around educating the educators. Another focus we have, which I think has never been so important now, is sports' role in addressing mental wellness and mental health. We launched Stay in the Game last year through a forum, a half-day forum that had over 150 experts in health, sport and social change, leagues and teams come together to discuss this, both how mental health affects within the sport industry, but also sports' role in addressing mental wellness in a wider issue. And that sort of initiative is taking the shape again in a sort of like-minded membership approach. We'll have 4 digital webinars that are sharing best practice from both within sport and outside of sport on mental wellness, around best curricula, methodologies, communicating, campaigns, approaches, and that type of thing. We'll have research taking place, bulletins going out to the network around resources that can be shared. And of course, at one point, we will have an event as well. And that's another focus. And then our third big focus is around Beyond Sport United, which is the initiative that we really focus on the sport industry, so teams, leagues, and brands. Every year we look at a different issue that's timely, and this year we're really looking at how the sponsorship industry is shifting and what place purpose is really taking in that, and what that means for the sport industry. There's a lot of brands out there that are looking at how they can be purpose-driven, how they can put social responsibility at the very heart of what they sponsor and why they sponsor something. And that really is the lifeblood of the sport industry, whether you be a team or a league or an athlete. So what does that look like, and what's that new landscape look like? And so we'll be holding a series of conversations online around that. We'll be publishing some white papers specifically looking at that. And again, we will probably be holding our flagship event, fingers crossed, that will focus on that issue in September, just ahead of UN Week. And I would like to just share one further focus, if I might, which is collective impact. We launched with our awards last year something called the Collective Impact Awards, where we identified 2 UN Sustainable Development Goals where we would provide funding for multiple organizations who are all using sport to address something around that UN SDG in their community. And we provided funding for them to all work together to address something that they might not be able to do on their own. And we did that with reduced inequalities last year with Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation, and climate action with the Swedish Postcode Lottery. And those are in full-fledged effect right now. We have some amazing organizations working together to see how their joint resources and knowledge and expertise can really look at that issue in a more holistic way and look at how sport can address it. And this year we're looking to do it with 2 additional UN SDGs, gender equality and education. So collective impact and just looking at how we can leverage our global network to make a bigger impact on these really important issues is something we're really focused on.
And I noticed in 2018, the Turn the Tide on Plastic boat that was skippered by our friend Dee Kafari was the recipient of one of your awards.
Yes, so the Beyond Sport Global Awards open for entries every year. This year's awards will open next week, so be sure to check out our website and you can apply. Entering is free. We have various categories across the UN SDGs, as well as a corporate awareness award. We get about 400 entries from all over the world across all of the categories. We then have an amazing selection panel across the world that helps us shortlist in each category 3 to 5 organizations that we feel are really using sport to the best of their ability to address that category, that issue. And then those shortlisters are, in previous years, were flown to New York for our flagship event in September. They were celebrated, recognized in front of the entire sport industry, and they took part in trainings, workshops, design thinking sessions to really help their own operations and what they do. We then have a winners selection committee, and the night of the second day of our flagship event, we have an award ceremony and the winners are announced that evening. The NGOs receive funding from our foundation, and of course the corporate award gets bragging rights that they are this effective. And we've had winners in that category from Fox to Adidas to SAP, who are now a huge partner of ours. So yeah, it's a very, very in-depth process, but it's really helped us understand how sport is being used worldwide to make a big impact. And we've seen through the years the shift in trends, the growth, the increase of sophistication in terms of how these organizations are making an impact.
So how is that alone then? How is that financed then, Lex?
The awards themselves are through our foundation. So it's completely ring-fenced. And there are amazing organizations that choose to make grants through our foundation to the award winners. We have amazing partners such as ESPN, the Gates Foundation, Swedish Postcode, Comic Relief, Laureus Sport for Good. And they all support us in selecting, of course, the shortlists and the winners, in addition to a panel of experts, as I said, and then the grants that they make go through the foundation.
What do you consider to be the biggest challenges when you look to the future, without patting yourself on the back just for where you've got right now, but the challenges that lie ahead in society today? What do you consider to be the biggest ones that and that you would want to be your legacy to add to your CV?
Geez, I mean, it's really hard to talk about this right now without COVID-19 just staring us directly in the face. I think that before that happened, we were looking at the challenges around technology and mental health, and the shifting landscape in terms of globalization, and really looking at how sport could play a role in addressing those challenges. And I think if we looked back in 5 years and said, we really feel like we pushed the sport industry to truly tackle and address STEM education in all its different forms, and look at how technology could both help society, but also how is it hindering, and how can sport really look at that and support the mitigating of that. And same goes with mental wellness and mental health. And I think like one of the big things to be aware of is that the landscape is shifting. Companies do care more about purpose now, and that's becoming more and more relevant, and it's becoming more and more purposeful in terms of how they're doing it and how they're strategizing around it. And it's a really good opportunity for sport to look at that, because sport is such a perfect conduit for social impact. It engages communities, it brings people together. So having that platform and that resource that sport has to address these issues that the corporate world is looking at, it's just a really kind of perfect timing. But that being said, I think that, again, going full circle back to where we talked about at the very beginning, we're in a public health crisis. There's a pandemic happening, and it's forcing us to look at how we can operate in isolation without traveling, without doing in-person events. And it's really interesting to see what impact that might have on the climate, and what impact that might have on just how we get information to people and what that looks like. So that's a huge challenge I think we'll be facing in very real time this year.
Absolutely. That's the biggest challenge for us all right now. Is there anything else, finally, Lex, that you would like our listeners to know about the organization and how they may get involved?
I just think it's really important that in this time, when there's less human interaction than you'd probably like, and less events for people to go to, that and people are in self-isolation and trying to figure this out, and everyone is very uncertain, and a lot of people are worried, that we have a lot of opportunities to engage and have a community around things that you might be interested in digitally. So I mentioned our Sport and STEM Alliance, our Stay in the Game Network. We're launching another community next week with our awards for people to engage and talk about the challenges that they're having organizationally, and how we might be able to address those, and what partners and funders might be able to do to mitigate challenges that organizations rely on funding to survive can do. And so we have an online community, and we're here. And if you want to join us and talk about interesting and meaningful issues in the role sport can play, we would love to have you. So please check out our website or shoot us an email, and we'll make sure to get you involved in one of our many online community conversations.
Perfect. And that website, of course, is beyondsport.org. And the email, I think, is info, isn't it?
Yes.
At beyondsport.org. Perfect. Well, there are ways to reach out digitally without putting yourself at risk, as you said, Lex, in these difficult times. But for now, I want to thank you for coming on the show, because you've got a lot on your plate right now dealing with this. And I did, having become aware of the work you were doing, I did want to share this with our audience, because it's fantastic work that you do. And I hope we can circle back in better times and keep up with your developments and your campaigns.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thanks for having me, and stay healthy.
And if you'd like to find out more about Beyond Sport, then you could do so by following the links in the show notes with this episode. That's at wispsports.com. Just drop down the Listen tab at the top of the front page there to Transcending Sport. And there you'll find all the episodes of this show. And whilst you're on the website, check out all the other shows that we have here at Wisp Sports. There are 46 in total, and we have now over 1,200 episodes across all sports around the world, so there's plenty to choose from. And if you have anything on your mind about women's sports that you would like us to cover here, then do drop us a line to info@wisports.com. And you can also post your comments and questions on our social media @wisports. Until the next time, thank you for listening and helping us turn up the volume on women's sports.